Welcome to the Big Roofs podcast where we talk about all things roofing. We're your hosts, John and AJ. Let's get started. John, let's talk about profit. Today we're going to talk about all things profit. And let's start at the lowest possible level. We'll just in case anyone is listening that doesn't understand. And there is honestly some misconceptions. So let's just get the definition straight. What is profit?
All right, so my kids are actually tomorrow going to do a hot chocolate stand. So kids, everybody should know this. It's surprising that people don't know this. If you take how much the actual cost of the hot chocolate was, if it's 25 cents and you're selling it for $1, you make 75 cents profit. And that's gross profit, everyone. That's gross profit. It's not net profit because you still have other overhead expenses. Like you got to pay your dad some money because I'm taking them all out there to the park and all those other expenses they have. But people need to understand the difference between gross profit and net profit. People talk about they think they understand.
Same thing.
They,
Or they
well,
think
they
about it as the same thing.
no, they well that is true. Some people do say this is just profit. Well, it's probably gross profit, and so you don't actually understand your net profit.
Yeah.
And then they talk about net profit the same way, where they're like, well, I've got a 9% or 12% or 10%, whatever it is, net profit. But they really don't actually understand because they don't actually have any money in their bank account. That's the craziest thing. It's like, well, my accountant says I made a 10% net profit. Well, where's the money then? The answer is you don't actually understand your overhead expenses or even your direct cost, which would affect your gross profit. So you may think that you understand the gross profit and the net profit, but you really don't because there's no money. We're talking about cash. Cash is king. And
Right.
if you don't have the money, your numbers are not accurate.
Yeah,
So
something happened somewhere. Let's take a step back though. Let's take a step back. Let's get all these definitions put out. So you have revenue, right? Revenue is the money coming in. That's your
I
total
sold
money
$2
coming
million
in.
of roofing this year, revenue.
That's
Yeah.
revenue. Okay. Then you deduct your gross costs, correct?
Your direct costs.
Direct
So I,
costs
I
per
call them,
job.
yeah, direct costs. So that would be most people, it's going to be your labor costs, your material costs, maybe some other like specific marketing costs that you may have spent on that job to get that job specifically. You may include like an ad that somebody clicked. Some people
You would
put that
you
note
would include that in direct cost and
if it
not
is
as overhead
if it
if it's
is
trackable.
if it's trackable. Like if you just like I have a budget of $5,000 for pay-per-click ads, that's your overhead cost. You have a marketing budget. But if you know somehow that you have a direct cost, there's a way to include that in that. And I'm not going to
That be
pay.
would be better for everyone just be kind of on the same page and just not include that just for so everyone's talking about the same numbers or no?
I'll disclaim I do things differently than most people because I want to know exactly how much because I don't pay 10-50-50 split. That affects you guys who pay 10-50-50 split
Mm.
way more. And this is the thing. This is why another reason we talked about this in another episode. 10-50-50 split does not work for most people. It does work for some, but for most people, it doesn't work because they don't understand the direct cost it took to get that job, to get that contract signed. But that's a whole
Okay.
other thing. But let's just go.
Well,
Direct
I was going to
cost.
ask about commission. That was actually another question I had is commission. So, would you count that before gross profit? Would you take commissions out before gross profit? But then some commission is based off of profit, right?
Correct. Correct. That's what I'm saying. 10-50-50 split is based off profit. I don't like that because I am very transparent with my entire team. They all have access to my QuickBooks. I have no problem showing the books. The problem runs into when people are like, well, I didn't have this ability to affect this job or this. I'm like, it's still part of the overhead. Like it's still part of that actual. That's why I do 10% off the top. I don't want to have all those conversations with people that like every single job. I don't know what it is. Every single job, 10% off the top. We have ProLine's proposals protecting our profit margin, our gross profit margin. So we never go under that. And if we do, for like if a salesperson is giving away a discount, then they're going to take a hit off of their commission, which is fine because we're going to protect the company. That's not me protecting me, it's protecting the company to make sure that the company makes profit on every single job. That's different for everybody else. But for me, I'm going to protect the company first with our profit margins.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. So specifically for you and your company, what items are you taking out to calculate your gross profit
So it's
on
basically,
every job? I know some jobs, like you said, you might
yep,
be able to attribute a certain cost, but across all your jobs, like what is your in ProLine, we have your budgets. Like what are those
yep.
cost items in your budgets?
The biggest things are material, labor, commission, and then we do have a marketing cost. Like we'll include, we want to see this for the budget just for our team, but like let's say we sell a $25,000 contract. Well, we have allocated in there. We don't separate like gutters because the only other trade that we do is gutters. So we're going to have a gutter cost in there that's directly related to that contract total revenue. It's really important because we're not going to have two contracts. We have to track the roofing contract and the gutter contract. We just want to know, okay, this is how much profit we're making on these things. And then there is a marketing line item. And that is if we run a specific neighborhood blitz in, and we run like an 8-wave campaign for that job, we will run it for X number of jobs. It could be several $100s. That's why we want to know it. We want to know like this is what it took to get this one job with these postcards. And there's a lead source tracked to that. The customer has indicated it they received a postcard. That's why we want to track that because we want to know how many postcards you have to send to get this new customer. We need to know that. And we're not just sending postcards consistently every month at the same rate. It's only for these specific jobs.
Okay. So
That's
for
what I do.
on your budgets for every job, you have marketing. So you are taking out commission before you calculate gross profit. You don't calculate gross profit before commission.
It, uh, so it automatically commission is going to be in there. Yes, correct. That's correct. So commission takes away our gross profit. So we have a certain floor for gross profit. And if the floor goes below there, then the commission is the one that takes the hit. Because a lot of
So
times it's really large jobs, so the quantity of money that sales reps are getting is a lot of money. So if they're going to make 8% versus 10% commission, they're still making thousands of dollars, but the company makes sure that it hits its profit margin.
so I think that's a really important distinction is people just kind of throwing around profit. There's really three types of profit. There's profit margin,
Mhm.
there's gross profit, and then there's net profit. And so gross or profit margin is going to be on your quote when you're quoting the job. That's really just going to be labor and materials, right? Because that's the only things being factored into the actual quote itself.
Yeah.
So profit margin's just based on labor and materials.
And also, we've had a comment about this about markup versus margin.
Yeah,
Our
super
CRM is
important.
based on margin, not markup.
Not markup.
So
Yeah,
if you just take 100, if you multiply something by 1.5, it's around 33% margin.
but
We
that's a 50% markup,
markup 50% markup
but
with
but it's different than margin.
but it's a 33% margin. You need to
The
understand.
calculation is a lot different
Mm-hmm.
too. So
Yep.
markup is like the easy way to think about markup, 100% markup is doubling the price. So if you have $100 and you do 100% and you do 100% markup, that'd be $200. But if you want, you can't have 100% margin because it approaches zero. But if you wanted if you wanted a 99% margin, then that $100 item is now going to be like $9,999,999 or whatever. That's how you get that like near. That's not the accurate number, but the whatever. If you want a 30% margin, you have to actually have like it increases it to that'd be increased to like $170 or something like that because it's like calculated backwards because you want at the after the transaction takes place, the margin is the percentage of the total transaction value that you want in profit.
Mm-hmm.
So no, that screws over a lot of people if they think that
Me
they're
included.
calculating
Yeah, me included. I
markup.
was marking up like for a couple years. And I was like, why don't I have any money? It's because it was markup, not margin.
Yeah, because the markup will be a much smaller amount of money. Like you'll think you're able to put 50% on a markup and think, oh, I'm going to make 50% profit. That's not how that works. You're making for like
33%.
Yeah, 33%. So it's
Yep.
like, so that's really, really, really important. So ProLine is all based around profit margin, which is the correct way to calculate it. So we have profit margin, which is based on labor and materials, and then we were just talking about gross profit. So that's for gross profit for you, that's where you're taking out everything. So the gross profit is going to be lower than your actual profit margin because you are taking out those additional items like commission and marketing if you can directly attribute it to the job.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So this is a huge thing. People think they have a certain, going back to what I said in the beginning, people think they have a large margin and a large profit, like amount, gross profit per job. But you really need to understand at the end of the day, do you have money? You have cash from that job. And it's usually something related to your overhead you don't understand, your direct costs you don't understand, and you may be getting confused markup versus margin.
Yeah. Okay. So after you've calculated gross profit, so if you do a job and you have $5,000 in gross profit at the end of the day. All right. So from there, let's talk about what is net profit. I
So
think
I
this is it's a little harder to calculate.
It is very hard to calculate. In general terms, net profit is what the organization decides to do with that gross profit. So this can be things like, do you have a expensive office space? Do you have expensive trucks? Do you like how do you spend that gross profit? It's your decision to take that bag of money and then you want to decide how much you want to spend of it to have even like the little bit left over after all of that. After your overhead's been paid, salary's been paid, all of your costs that are associated with your business, how much has been paid from that gross profit bag at the end of the year, into the quarter, into the month, what's left over after that. So you need to understand your like monthly budgets, your quarterly budgets. You need to understand like annual budgets. If you don't understand that intimately, and you're not even adding like if you add a $50 a month subscription to some software, that's $600 a year. You have to understand all the dollars. If you don't, you're not going to have any net profit left over. Even your accounting is going to show you have a net profit and you're going to have $0 in the account because you don't understand. So
If you didn't account for every one of those costs.
correct.
Well, that's really tempting as a business owner. I mean, I know this is like, you see all that money sitting in an account and you're like, oh yeah, I can spend money on X or Y. And you do that a few times or 10 times. And then you're like going to the end of the month being like, where did my money go? And it's
Yep.
like, you have to keep track of every single dollar spent. Okay. So and all that money gets deducted from your total gross profit for all jobs. And then that's your net profit. Right.
Yep. In a
And then
nutshell.
So let's talk about actual targets here. So let's go back to the profit margin on your quotes. So this is the money left over after just paying for labor and materials. For the profit margin, what do you believe is a responsible, ideal profit margin for roofing contractors to be using on their quotes?
All right, a responsible, that's an interesting way to put it. Everyone's going to say, well, my market's different, or my customers are different, or whatever the case may be. I would say that I'm still not achieving the highest level of profit margin that I need to achieve in my businesses. Like we can all shoot for higher numbers, and it's not about greed. It's not about I want more and more money. It's about giving your end customer the best experience you can possibly give them. If you're a good steward, use that money the right way with the right marketing strategies, you need to have an incredibly high profit margin. If you think, well, they're just not going to pay it, all the excuses that people have, it comes down to like a value proposition. You're not presenting the value that you bring to other people. Well, we're all installing the same roofs. We'll have the same, we're all whatever GAF master leads. We're all GF. Okay, you have to differentiate yourself. Figure out a way to do that in every market, and you can demand a higher profit margin. And people do it to us. They have been doing it for us for years. Where, well, you're the highest one. You're the highest one. You're the highest bid we have out of 5 bids. The way we do that is because what
But then
I
they sign
believe
with you,
they
right?
sign with us. Yeah. can you work with us? No, people do ask to work with us. We'll say, okay, look, would you trust me less if I lowered my price? And then that makes them think. They're like, oh yeah, I want to get the value that you're bringing. I don't want to devalue you right now by taking $500 off, $1,000 off, whatever the number is. You have to be confident in your own margin. This all comes back to like knowing your numbers, knowing what your overhead is, knowing how much your marketing costs. If you know all that and you actually, from leadership, take it all the way down to your sales people, even your admin, accounting, all the people that are on your team, you'll have less like upset teammates because like, why are we making so much money? Well, they understand the numbers. It's understanding the numbers gives people confidence to sell things. Understanding the numbers gives your team a better attitude because they understand how much the business actually costs. If you are transparent in your business, that's where it comes from. It's not from like some crazy sales technique of like how to convince people to trick people to go with you. Like that's not it. Knowing your numbers gives you confidence to understand I need this profit to continue to grow my business or to maintain profitability, to pay my team the best, to pay my sub crews the best. Like all these things matter. I got totally off track, but that's exactly what that's
That's how you
the
think about
origin.
it. That's
Yeah.
that's the thought process, which I like. That's really powerful. But let's go back. What is the actual number? What is the number that you believe is the right number for a profit margin on quotes or
It's
range?
I don't think there's a range. I think that minimum is 30% is, I mean, if you're going to go into the poorest, lowest income areas in the country, 30%. And they're like, well, these other guys are doing it for 18 or 20 or 25%. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Those people's numbers don't matter because they are not going to be in business statistically in 2 years or 5 years. Like the numbers do not lie with that. I've only been in business for almost 8 years. No one, like, there have been so many companies that have come and gone, so many in my little time being in roofing, and it's only going to increase more and more and more.
So
And
30% is if you're so what would you sell to a guy that's like, our market is just really tough and like we have to do 27%, like 27% is the max we can do on profit margin. What do you tell that person?
I think that
I
you
like
need
it.
to improve your process. You need to improve your process and say and explain why. You need to talk about 5-star experiences. Well, they don't care about it. They just want a roof. Okay. Well, there's something that's broken in your process that when we do everything we're supposed to do and we don't do it every time, but we try to do the process that we have for our customers, our homeowners every time. We're answering the phone every single time. We're available online 24 hours a day. Those are two things. Just start with those two things. If you're not doing those two things, forget it. Just stop everything else. You're not going to get the margins that you need. I'm not even going to go through our whole process. It'll be too long. But just start with those two things. If you have somebody answering the phone every single day that you're open, your hours are, and you're available online 24 hours a day, which means you have some sort of response that they get an automated text and automated email. If you don't have that,
It doesn't
forget
have
it.
to be awake
Yeah.
24/7. You just need to have the systems in place like ProLine to be able to handle inbound communication.
Yep. Customers absolutely love the fact that they're getting responded to with valuable information. It's a link to schedule an appointment, or it's a short video of saying thank you for reaching out that you just make in 7 seconds. You make that little video and they get a video, they see a team member's face. Like, do these things, you can demand the profit margin that you deserve. And the customers will want to pay it because you're bringing the value. It's not like, I having to pay this extra money for, like, they're gonna want to pay it because they know they know, like, and trust you because you
Yeah.
have done all these things leading up to the actual inspection before it even happens, and then during the inspection, and then during the sales proposal, and then after the sales proposal has been sent. All these things are really important to make sure that you can actually achieve the profit margins that you deserve. If you don't do these things and you just do it old school and like you have a receptionist answering the phone when she's not on her lunch break or smoke break, and then she says, "Hey, oh, I'm so glad you called. I got your message. I'm gonna have Jimbo call you back and schedule a freaking sales proposal." A sales call. Oh yeah. Oh well, he'll call you back. What time is that? I don't know. He'll call you. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. If you're doing it and you listen to me right now, stop doing it right now.
It's
Stop
so
doing it.
frustrating when I hear guys and they say that. Like when we're like, hey, well, what's your process? And they're like, oh yeah, we just pass the lead off to one of our reps. It's
The,
like you're
the
just
most
flushing money down the
and
drain.
I worked for companies like that. I was like, I cannot believe this is happening. As like a little 22-year-old, I was like, this is the wildest thing in the world. And you got to stop doing that. You don't deserve the. This is what I'm saying. If you don't do these processes, you don't deserve the profit. Have fun. Let's talk about some real numbers really quick. If I'm hitting 40% profit per million, every $1 million I sell, I hit around 40% profit. That's $400,000 of profit, right? If you're hitting 22% or 25%, that's 25%, $25,000. I'm making
25, 250,000.
$250,000. I'm making $150,000 more than you every $1 million I sell, like of profit.
Yeah. What about the
Like
guys though? So like I've talked to guys and they'll try to frame it in like a ethical. They'll be like, oh, it's just unethical to be out here charging these homeowners
I
for
would
more
say
than
they don't know their numbers.
25%
100%. They
profit.
don't know their numbers. They don't know them. They do not know their numbers. They're probably door knockers. Sorry. They're probably door knocking because they're like, well, we're not putting any effort. This is why they're door knocking. So they're not putting any effort into marketing. So they don't have a risk out there. They're just like training guys and maybe a really good process of door knocking. Door knocking works. I'm aware that canvassing is the most effective ROI in all of marketing still. I am aware of this. The reason that guys don't have confidence about charging the right margin for these is because they're like, well, I'm not actually putting any effort out there. I just got my, like you called it, like the roofing club. They just got their club. Hey guys, go out there and sell it. I don't deserve high margins.
They're not
That's
creating the value, so they're
yeah.
also not charging for the value.
There's no machine they're all they're doing is they have a sales team that goes and sells things. There's no actual real brand. Like there are companies that I know that are like getting bought up by private equity because private equity sees the numbers, which is great for them, but there's not an actual real brand. Like they're just a sales team. They just rotate through sales reps over and over again. I know guys on these and they just rotate through. They just rotate through. They just keep
Because they can't even retain them because it's
yeah, because it's not an actual machine. It's all it is just a sales force. And if you can't hack it, see you later. So the owners don't actually have any confidence because they're not building anything. They're all they're doing is it's a sales organization that's valuable for investors, which is great, good for them. But
I
in
wouldn't even say I think that's a mistake because the once the owners are out, it's like those
yeah, then it's done.
sales reps only come on board because they're tied to a specific person. As soon as that person leaves, like the
That's
sales team
true.
falls apart.
That is true.
So I don't even know how those
We're getting off
hang
subject,
out.
but the idea
We need to
is
get back on track.
you want to make $400,000 per million. You don't want to make $20,000 per million. I mean, $200,000 per million.
Let so you make yeah, absolutely. And you want to make that 400,000. Let's talk about what do you do with that. Well, let's go down next level, gross profit. So gross profit, you have $400,000 in the business.
Yep.
Or sorry, no, that's just profit margin. You have the 400,000, right? Now let's talk about gross profit. So what is the number after you're deducting the commission, after you're deducting any attributable marketing costs? Like what should that number be? Because it's obviously it's not going to be 30% anymore, right? So what you're saying it's got to be
Well,
30% on
so
profit margin at least.
here's why. Here's why.
So what is it? What
Here's
is it
why.
for gross profit?
Here's why I'm trying to say 400,000 for per million because if I pay my commission sales reps 10% off the top, that's how I pay them. I don't do 10-50 split. I pay 10% of revenue. So for every $1 million, they're making $100,000 of commission.
Okay.
So you take the $100,000 from the 400,000, and there's $300,000 of profit after commission.
So you're saying it's 40%. You said 30% before, but are you saying
I'm saying
it's
that's
40%?
the minimum. I'm saying that's
30
the
is the minimum.
I'm trying to be nice to people, but
But the ideal, so the target is really 40. Is what you're saying. The target should be 40.
I think the target should be higher than what I do. I think it should be 45, 50%. There's a lot of people. Tom Reaper, Contractor Fight, he preaches hardcore 50% margin every
50%
job.
margin. Yeah.
And
So,
I'm like,
so
I
the
want to be like
target
that.
is 50. The target is 50. If you're in the if you're in the 40s, you're safe. Anything below 30 is like you're going out of business. Is that
I
kind
think
of what you're
so.
saying?
I
Okay.
think so. I think
So
that
that
you're going to be out of business.
so if that's the range, so you're saying for gross profit, like after you deduct commission and any attributable marketing costs, what is it? Just 10% lower. So like the target is still 40, and then
For me, yeah.
or
But
yeah.
let's get into another profit question. If you pay 10-50-50 split off the 400,000, you're taking, this is how I see people do it. They take the 400,000 and they take 10% of that, which is $40,000 for admin. And then they split the 360 left with their commission guys. So they're paying, was that $180,000? They're paying $180,000 per million if they hit the 40% margin, which they don't.
It's almost like there's a reverse incentive to have a lower profit margin, because the higher profit margin you do, the higher you're paying your sales rep.
Well, not
The more
really, because
money
there
you're
is,
losing.
you are making, I mean, if you didn't make any margin, then it's bad for everybody. The commission sales rep doesn't like it. The admin doesn't like it. The company doesn't like it. I just think it's a crazy term. And I love people's feedback on this. That's how I understand it. 10-50-50 split. I can't even imagine that. And don't get me started on like public adjusters. We take this percent off the top immediately. And then I'm like, where's the money? Where's the money left over? There's no money.
Yeah. All right, we got to finish. We got one more number to look at here, though. Net profit.
Net.
So net profit. What is the target on net profit? Like what is at the end of after everything has been paid for, the office, the trucks, everything. What should be left over? Because I know the industry average, because I've done research on this. The industry average is, I believe, like 3.8% or something like that across the whole industry.
They say it's 0%.
Maybe that's accounting. But what is for you and your business? What is that? What is that number? What should it be for other contractors?
Our best year at net profit, which was accurate. I actually had the money in the bank. We did very large jobs, and the accountant matched up with the money that was in the bank. We had like a 14% net profit, but it's usually way lower than that. It's usually like half of that, like 6 or 7% for real numbers. Like if I'm a small contractor and you're doing 5% net profit, that's pretty good, because that's $50,000 of net money at the end of the day.
So what is the target for contractors? Is it 10? You should be shooting for 10.
I think 10. Everybody says 10 because it's a nice, easy, round number. I think it just depends on what you want for your business. It's how you're paid. Like, do you pay yourself? Are you an S corp? Like, there's so many ways. Like, I don't know. There's a target for net profit.
Because if you're paying yourself before net profit, then net profit can be lower.
Correct. I think you need to look at people. People are the most expensive expense you have. How many people do you have in your team? What do they cost? What are their peripheral costs for those people? And you want to pay your people, you want to pay your team as much as possible. So have really, really awesome people, and don't have a lot of people per million. I think the one thing that goes around the industry a lot is revenue per capita. Like how much revenue, that's okay as long as you're hitting your profit margins. Because people are like, well, I've got X amount of revenue and I've got this many people. Well, if you're not hitting the margins, then it doesn't really work out. So there's a caveat to that. You have to, I don't actually know the profit margin that you need to have an accurate revenue per capita number. But I'm trying to do, every person is a $500,000 for like low level. Like, and that's people that are not on the roof. That's just admin people. If we can have, if they're full-time, it's $500,000. If they're part-time, it's less than that, depending on how much their expenses are.
We're out of time, John. I'm sorry. I gotta cut you off. Thanks for joining us today. See you guys next week.